Welcome back to That's Delivered. I'm your host, Trucking Ray, and today we have a returning guest. I'm excited to have this conversation. If you've been following the show for a while, you may have remembered the last time we sat down with Scott Wilkie, a business agent for Teamsters Local 638. Last time we talked about the transition from education to union advocacy, what Local 638 is all about, and some of the projects and initiatives that they've had the initiatives to work with. Since then, a lot has happened in the world, in the trucking world, for unions and workers' rights. So today we're going to dive into what Scott Wilkie has to do with current events, union new projects, working on for, the Teamsters, making it all work. So we appreciate his work, also with the DRIVE program, which plays a key role in advocating for workers' rights and reshaping policies and the impact that drivers and union members have. Also, of course, we're going to dig into deeper some of the topics that we touched last time and how the industry is evolving and how the union is adapting and what's next in the future for labor as far as for trucking. So let's get right into it. Scott, welcome to the show. Yo, Scott,
How you doing? I'm good, man. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited. The topics today are some things that have been in the news recently, and affecting a lot of people. I always say that everything starts and stops with labor. And labor kind of touches every aspect of conversation in America. So I'm excited to touch on some of these topics with you today. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You've been busy ever since then too. Just telling me about some of the things that you deal with in your day. What's been going on with Local 638 since the last time we talked? What are some of the big events and the major updates that union members can kind of listen for and say, hey, this is what we should pay attention to?
Sure. So I know we'll touch on it in a little bit, but a lot of the political stuff right now we're having to be more involved in because the policies at the federal and state level are affecting workers and affecting unions. So we've been involved a lot in that. For better or worse, I think because of the state of the economy right now and the cost of living, and maybe some people at their work not feeling like they're getting treated the best, or the wages that they have aren't reflective of the work that they're doing, are reaching out to us because they want to be represented by the Teamsters at their workplace. So we just had another vote recently of a work group that reached out to us called Pack Edge, local business. Some of you might have heard of here in the Twin Cities. 100% vote to become union and be recognized by Local 638. So that's exciting. I think since we spoke last, we've had, if you've heard of like St. Ben's and St. John's College, or University, up just north of St. Cloud, the bus drivers, since we represent drivers, and bus drivers as well, the bus drivers at the college have voted to become Teamsters Local 638 members. So that's exciting. And some small businesses in North Dakota as well. So I think right now, maybe a silver lining, I suppose, to, what the pressure folks are feeling to try to get an advantage in the workforce is, unions can provide that. So we've had a lot of interest in folks reaching out to us, and, we're always, reaching out to different areas of labor just to see if they're interested. We've even had daycare centers reach out to us, which is, something that would fall under our jurisdiction. So for Local 638. So that's kind of cool. Something different that, we can be supportive of, and you learn more about these people's jobs too, and the stresses that they have, and, some of the unique contract language that they would want in their workplace. So, it's been exciting to see, because of the tough times that folks are in right now, maybe excitement or energy around union labor as, sort of a reaction to those struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about all of the changes that are happening. People wonder, can I get more security? Can I get more something to depend on versus feeling like, man, I got to do all this myself. So joining up as a group, I think it will be an advantage. I mean, that's huge. Is there anything else that behind the scenes that people shouldn't, maybe they just don't know about? Maybe there's something people didn't realize that goes on for unions and what you've been doing recently.
Yeah, we're always trying to build relationships, whether it's in politics, with businesses. Sometimes people who don't, understand the inner workings of unions and how we operate don't understand that we're not out to put stress on an employer. Sometimes it's when you see a strike line, those get the sexy headlines and people feel like that's what's, taking place, but it's really not what's going on. But one of the things that, our local represents, we're a general local, so we represent a lot of different industries, but films like TV shows, movies, a lot of people saw that, Love is Blind came and filmed here. And that was cool because, hey, it puts Minnesota on the map, right? But as Teamsters, we look at that as that's bringing jobs. And in Hollywood, Teamsters make up a huge part of Hollywood union labor. And so does, SAG-AFTRA, and a lot of people are aware of that union. But the Teamsters are the folks that are operating those crews on set and kind of making the operation itself run. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And so we looked at that as an exciting opportunity that, maybe more film work is coming back to Minnesota, because that's essentially an injection of funds into an economy, right? You think about how much money had to be spent locally here to make that show run. I mean, every single morning you need to feed the people on set. They need coffee, they need places to stay, they have to gas up their vehicles. They have, all of our businesses are getting a bit of a jolt, right? And back in the, in the 90s, I was a 90s kid here and remember the Mighty Ducks days and Jingle All the Way and all those movies and Grumpy Old Men, those movies that were all filmed here in Minnesota. Fargo, was filmed in Minnesota. We've gone away from that because back in the day, we had a tax credit here in Minnesota that allowed movie producers to get some of the money back that they spent, by making the film here. And so we kind of incentivize people to tell their stories in Minnesota and then film and bring that work here for our workers. And after Jesse Ventura was in office, the film tax credit went away. We've since got back a bit of that, in the last legislative cycle, we got a bill passed to incentivize Hollywood to come back to Minnesota, but it really isn't enough because other states have better tax credits than we do still. So I think if we can get that moving in the right direction, or even do what they did in St. Louis County up north and do their own tax credit just for the county. Duluth is now seeing movies coming back to St. Louis County up north. And so I say all this because you asked what's going on behind the scenes. I met with Mayor Fry recently and a couple of movie producers about a few weeks ago about working with the mayor's office in Minneapolis City Council to maybe mirror what they're doing in Duluth and incentivize Hollywood to come back to at least the Twin City, Minneapolis specifically. Melvin Carter, maybe they can do their own, if Minneapolis takes off. But seeing what's out there as far as, showcasing what's going on, around the Twin Cities, showcasing our landscape and our people and our businesses, and bringing some of that work here to inject surplus into our businesses, fill up our hotels, fill up our restaurants, and utilize our resources and give these business owners, more of a profit for these work. For this work that's, available and just looking for a place to film. So that one was kind of exciting just because it's so different than what we normally do is, as drivers, which is a lot of our local. But yeah, a lot of folks in the local 630 represents people in the film industry. And so when we do get film work in Minnesota and they have union labor, Teamsters are the ones who are driving the flatbed trucks, hauling props around and like I said, working behind the scenes to help the film operate. So we'll see where that goes. But I'm hoping that, with Jacob Fry in an election year, he's looking for ways, right? This is mutually beneficial. He's looking for ways to show voters that, I am, making Minneapolis a better place. And so you should vote for me for another cycle here. And we're looking at it as we're trying to find people who want to help workers. So it's mutually beneficial. And so, yeah, we'll see where it goes. But that was an exciting thing that happened recently that I'm anxious to see what develops.
Wow, the wheels are turning, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Looking in the future as to potentially what else we could add, help out with different sectors. So, man, think about that. What is the biggest challenge in the past year has it been for the union?
Yeah, I think the same thing that it's been for most people is just, battling some, economic downturn right now. I mean, as we're talking right now, the tariffs have, gone into effect, and that's pretty much, if you open up a new browser, right, tab, that's the first thing that's going to pop up on your news headlines is what's going on with the stock market. And because, like, for us UPS guys, this UPS stock is down, right? So then what happens? UPS has to cut costs. Well, the biggest cost that they have at their company is their people. And so, they've automated, their HR department, they've automated their payroll department. And they've even automated a lot of their new buildings. And the work that used to be, people touching packages is now being done on belts and tray systems, and the scanning that used to be done is different. But now what we've seen in the last few weeks is, for me as a labor, the representative of the workers, if somebody gets fired for something, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't cross the line, things that we used to be able to get people back to work with a phone call and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, they made a mistake, but they don't deserve to lose their job. We should get them back to work. The company's been more motivated to put them back to work because, they need staffing, or they're, the volume's coming in and they need the resources. But right now, with the volume trending downward because people are spending more money on groceries than they are on, goods online, we haven't seen the packages at UPS flowing like they used to. And the stock price, dropping again to the pre-COVID numbers. UPS is looking for ways where they can tighten the wallet. And, unfortunately that means layoffs, right? So we're dealing with that in a lot of our buildings and trying to make sure that people still are getting their hours of work. If they're laid off from full-time into part-time, and they know what their rights are as far as, if they want to bid into another building where there is more work by seniority, right? So there's a lot of moving parts right now to try to keep people working. As UPS is shrinking its workforce a little bit due to the shrinking in their volume. So that's been a struggle. Just like everybody, other businesses is looking at their bottom line right now with costs going up and profit margins not meeting those costs. So I think, right, we negotiate contracts. For some of our contracts, it's tough to, go to the negotiating table because people want, raise increases. But if right now the profits are down, it's tough to get those increases. And we're not going to ask for, money for people that doesn't exist, right? That just doesn't work. So that's been a struggle too. We almost went on strike with Fargo Paint and Glass recently in North Dakota because, folks are struggling and the business is struggling. So they had to find a way to meet in the middle and say, okay, here's what we can do to be financially, successful as a business, but also make sure that our workers are getting, fair wages and benefits and taken care of. And it took our business agent, Shane Block, he put in a lot of effort, and I think the company had to put in a lot of effort too to get creative and make it happen. But ultimately we got a contract, didn't go on strike, right? Worked through it. But there's a lot of that going around, not in just the Teamsters union, but other unions too. Trying to find a way to just make it all work right now. It's not a lot of fun, but this happens, right? Economic downturns happen, and hopefully the damage of this is not as bad as what I heard on NPR this morning. So,
But let me give people something that they could look at. You show me a stack of grievances. Man, just put that in there. See how many.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is, I'll try to make sure I don't show anybody's names on these things here, but this is the last month worth. So I'm one of the agents on staff here. So I represent about 1,000 of our workers. And that's not even including the excessive overtime grievances out of UPS, which if you're a UPSer listening, you might know what that is. So right now, just for one issue, which is excessive overtime at UPS, in one of my buildings, the Maple Grove building, I'm on track for about 2,200 to 2,400 9.5 grievances this year for excessive overtime. But for all the other issues, like, I didn't get paid properly or on time, or I'm being harassed. That was a phone call I took right before we hopped on, was a driver who felt like they were being harassed this morning by a manager, or somebody got fired for stealing something. These things happen, and so we're the response to that. Sort of like for people who don't know what a business agent does, we're sort of like you go to court, you've got a prosecution, you've got a defendant, and I'm the lawyer for the defendant. We're trying to make sure that if something happened to you, that we get the right result. And there's a lot of issues, right now. So it's a lot. It's a lot. I probably take about 80 grievances a week. And so when I get a phone call from a member like yourself, it says, "Hey, what's going on with my grievance?" Sometimes it's like, "Which one, Ray?" Because you got a few issues we're trying to fix, and to be, transparent, I think UPS kind of leans into that sometimes, because if they muck up the system for justice and equality at the workplace, then some people use the phrase "justice delayed is justice denied." So if you don't get a quick resolution to your issue, then it doesn't really feel like justice took place. So that's why we have some language in our contract that forces the company to be more motivated to get things done efficiently. But if you have a harassment grievance because your manager was harassed you today and crossed the line of what the contract says is harassment, and it takes me a month to get you a hearing, that time heals all wounds. Sometimes you walk in a hearing like, wow, we kind of worked through it. It doesn't sting as much. And that's not, we don't want that. We want to be able to get results for people as soon as possible. So it's hard when we've got a lot of issues happening all at once, and we're trying to get resolution on things as soon as we can. And thankfully, I'm very fortunate to represent folks who they get it. That I'm very open about where things are at and transparent. I've tried to be communicating as much as possible with people so they know where things are going. But yeah, it's a lot, man. We're trying to keep up with what the company's been doing or not doing sometimes at the workplace. So yeah, well, but like I said, I just remind myself, whether it's the economy or what's happening with discipline right now, it's ebbs and flows. So right now it's still tough, but we'll get back to even keel, hopefully sooner than later.
All right. Some upcoming projects. Maybe last time you were on, we can touch on what you talk about as the women's committee and how the union is pushing for a better engagement with as far as education for members. Can you give us an update on those efforts as far as those projects?
Yeah, so I think last time we talked about the women's committee, and Hannah Bernardson is one of our agents, who she heads that up. And if you want to get involved with that, if you're a local 638 member, they have their own Facebook group. So if and all of our contact information is on teamsters638.com. If you want to find, my information or Hannah's information, or, somebody else that you need to reach out with at the local, or just have questions about, union activities or how to get involved. But I would say if you're a female member of ours, definitely reach out to Hannah, because she's got those ladies fired up, and I think it's sort of like I compared it not long ago to, like, it was like a volcano. It was like when we hired Hannah on, it was like all this like stored up energy from these ladies that they just needed to have that direction to start getting things rolling. It's been pretty cool to see. So yeah, they're very active, and that's been, like I said, really, really cool to see this new direction that they've been working on. I think last time we spoke, I started maybe not. We officially have recognition of the Indigenous Peoples Conference within the Teamsters IBT. So for folks who don't know me, mixed race. My dad's Anishinaabe, from Turtle Mountain Reservation, and so Indigenous issues are something that are really important to me. And I very rarely meet a lot of Native American Teamsters, and when I do, it's cool because there's some extra connection there, right, outside of just being a Teamster. And we actually in North Dakota represent my family's reservation up in the Belcourt area. Our UPS rugby building is the one that delivers out there. So it's cool. We'll be out there, I think a month or so, and get to see some cousins when I'm up there, and that's cool for me. But what I think the Indigenous conference has done already in its infancy here is just letting our Native American members know that, hey, we see you and we recognize and we know you exist still, and we're trying to create some momentum to get more folks involved surrounding Indigenous issues. About a year and a half ago, it was during peak season, Christmas season at UPS, we had a Native American member of ours, Alexis Whitehawk. She went missing after work. She was a part-timer who was a driver helper. She got dropped off by her UPS driver walking home, and was never seen again and was found murdered. And MMIW, missing murdered Indigenous women statistics, are a big issue in Indian country, and it's something that we are feeling here within Local 638, and it's something that this conference is going to work to recognize too. A lot of people don't know this, but the second leading cause of death for Native American women is murder, and we felt that personally here. The Minneapolis UPS Hub felt that statistic personally here recently. So that's part of what this conference is going to do, is recognize, our Indigenous members, help to work with and, be a part of the solutions to Indigenous issues, and create pathways for Native American folks to get into union labor. Most of us, whatever job you have, right now as you're listening, had somebody who either gave you a tip or knew somebody who worked at that place to kind of get your foot in the door. And so that's what I kind of want to be for Native American kids is, hey, here's some job opportunities, and, I can get you connected and get your foot in the door and then help you be successful. And so I'm hoping that this November, I'm meeting this summer, and we're going to try to craft out something. Hopefully this November we have a kind of a big foundation building event that we can look to and say, okay, now we're moving in the right direction. It's not just we have a page on the IBT, that recognizes our existence. That's great, and that's the first step. But now we're getting things done, and we're walking our talk here a little bit. So that's something that I'm working on quite a bit and rolling out. And yeah, hopefully next time we chat, and in the fall here, at least I can point to something significant that we've done with that. Also, Jonathan Keychek, who's the president of our local, was recently nominated and voted in as the vice president of the LGBTQ plus caucus for the Teamsters, for the IBT. So that's a big deal. And this summer we'll have a huge presence at Twin Cities Pride. Our joint council I think they've already raised enough money to go over budget. So it's going to be huge. The IBTs having their people make this their kind of their center point. I think LA was last year, and this year it's going to be Minneapolis for their big centered sort of pride event of the year. So yeah, we're really excited about where that's going to. And TNBC's coming up. So all the extracurriculars, right? The gravy on top of our regular job. Those things are moving in the right direction, and sometimes it's a nice break from the hundreds of grievances that are here that we're trying to get resolved. Being able to do something a little more hands-on with folks is a nice reprieve from that daily norm as well. I'll be honest.
Wow, yeah, that's huge. I mean, I saw when you put that out there, man. That's great, starting that for the Indigenous. I appreciate you doing that. That was great success. Seeing that happen for you and for so many others. And I know you hold that dear to your heart. Is there any other projects in the pipeline that you're particularly excited about? I know there may be a few.
I think, yeah, there's so I always have like ideas in my craw, and thankfully I work at a local that has a lot of like-minded folks where we're not afraid to throw darts at a dartboard and just try new things. And if they fail, then they fail, right? But at least we're trying. We're not just going to spin our wheels. One of the things I'm excited for that, I think the members will be excited for too, is where we're going with incorporating more technology into our day-to-day at the local. So like you saw, and we've talked about it before, how we have to handwrite, all these grievances are handwritten. They have handwritten case numbers, and you have to stamp them and as date received and all these, these processes. And then people call me and say, what's going on with my grievance? So in an effort to try to fix that and be more efficient, Jonathan, our local president, got us on Salesforce, which most businesses use for sales. But we're using it to store data about our members in order to categorize, and resolve issues. So I'll give you an example using myself. So let's say, I file a grievance because I didn't get paid on a vacation check, on time. Okay, so I filed a grievance. What happened with it? Did it ever get resolved? How much should I get paid? Right. And we're trying to streamline the processes so that way, if we have your contact info, Ray, we could give you a text with a PDF image of your resolved grievance, or even the steps, right? You file a grievance. Hey, Ray, here's a PDF copy of it. We've received it on this date. Hey, Ray, we resolved it on this date. And you can see at the bottom that's what your payout's going to be. And you can expect that vacation check plus penalty in a week from today, right? Creating more communication and transparency. So there's a couple businesses that I've reached out to that I'm actually meeting with in a couple days to see how we can digitize the grievance process. So that way it's easier for members to file a grievance. And then it's easier for us to process agreements, and also easier for our members to know what's going on with their grievance after it's been processed. So, they can not be, I guess, left in the dark on where things are going. So, how long will that take? I don't know, but it's got to happen because, we got to be more efficient because, we're in an instant gratification society. People, have, expectations of which we got to be held to. And then the other thing that I think is kind of interesting, and we'll see where it goes, is a new membership application that's in a digital format. So if you've ever bought a house in the last decade, you probably had to use DocuSign or JotForm or some kind of digital PDF. So I put our membership application in DocuSign in order for businesses that we represent to have that on file, to where new members on day one can just simply fill it out by typing in all their info. And then it immediately sends the email to our admins, versus the 3-part carbon paper. Is that a 2 or an S, or what do they put there? Right. Deciphering things, snail mailing it to the office and process. Right. So we can get people, in and approved faster, especially if they're coming from, if they're a 120 member, now they're a 638 member, we have to work with those locals to get them transferred, streamlining that process. And then, nothing gets lost when it's just, automatically sent through email. So yeah, that's a little inside, and maybe it's, so people go, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but I think it'll make a big deal in the long run. Again, just for us being more efficient for our members.
Nice.
Yeah.
You think about all those cases or all those grievances, or, what does the future look like for some of these projects? To make them streamlined, do you think there'll be any be successful to get a lot of that done, or are we just going to have to keep pushing for it and keep putting it out there in the forefront as something important?
Yeah, like with anything, you have to be willing, to fail, or like I said, sometimes it's just throwing darts and seeing what sticks. And on these projects that we're working on, I have to remind myself too, success is never linear, and whatever we're working on, we're not gonna just hit it on the first time. And so to try to keep myself and then the people involved motivated and engaged with it, I think is always the biggest struggle. It's one thing to have an idea and have people say, yeah, good idea. But it's another thing to have people say, great idea, and I want to be involved, and I'm going to give you my time and energy through whatever struggles it takes to see it through. And that's, that might be the labor movement in a nutshell, I guess. But it's true on these projects that it's not gonna hit the mark the first time. And if you're motivated, you're gonna stick with it, right? So
yeah. I think that's good for a lot of people to see that it's not that you just give up on it, but you keep trying if it doesn't work. But hopefully some of them stick, like you said, throwing darts. Good analogy. I like that. So yeah, some of those hurdles are just something that comes with being a part of a union or part of life. How can union members get more involved in some of these efforts, so that they don't get this kind of fight discouragement? They got to fight a lot of obstacles just to do what they need to do to be successful at it. What would your advice be for them?
I think with anything, whether it's trying to get anything accomplished, just showing up is half the battle, right? if you're trying to, trying to lose weight, just getting to the gym, I think is 90% of it, right? Just getting there. And we saw that this past weekend with the hands off protests, right? 25,000 people down at the Capitol, right? Just people just showing up is and making time and energy for something is the majority of the work in and of itself. And so if you're willing to put in any extra time or efforts or energy into a cause that you're near and dear to, and it's something we're supporting, then let's go. Like, give me a call, right? And I can definitely get you pointed in the right direction, or shoot me an email. My contact information is posted in all of our buildings I represent. It's posted on our website. Or if there's something that you want to engage with that we're not doing, let us know. But I mean, even recently at our last union meeting, we had a couple people stand up and say, hey, we should be doing this, or hey, I want to support this, or let's move in this direction, and put it to a vote and make it happen. One of the things, in fact, this is as recently as this last union meeting we're at, is the May Day event happening at the Minnesota Capitol on May 1st at 4:30. So May Day is typically, like, we celebrate as like a celebration of Workers' Day. But there's going to be hundreds of cities doing the same thing. I would imagine probably similar turnouts to what we saw over the weekend, where different community groups are going to be recognizing International Workers' Day on big rallies. So May 1st, here's an opportunity, right? If you're listening and you want to be involved and be engaged, low level effort, right? Just showing up and you being in that space is support enough. Supporting workers and workers' rights, because right now, as I can imagine, as it's always been and probably will be for the rest of the time, people want to make sure that workers don't have everything that they ask for in the workplace, whether it's safe working environments or fair wages or respect. Go down the list of reasons. It's always going to be a fight. So if you want to be involved, I would suggest, and you're in the Twin Cities here, I'd suggest going down to the Capitol in the afternoon of May 1st. And like I said, just showing up, that's half the battle. Show up and get involved that way.
Yeah. I mean, you want your voice to be heard, or you want your opinions to matter. How important is it that they do it the right way? I mean, there's quite a bit of, in the air of hitting the news, more so of how to do it the wrong way. That could actually take attention away from the topic. Actually can make it worse. What would your advice be for those that maybe say, hey, what's the use? Because look what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question, man. Because different issues have different levels of temperament for folks. I tell you what, I always try to find silver linings in everything, and the energy, at least, for how people have been handling themselves, depending on, what your issue is. It's nice to see people pissed off again. I think it's so easy, and maybe we've gotten fat and happy as Americans because we haven't had to fight like this for so long. It's nice to see people pissed off and fighting back. Cory Booker's filibuster was, I think, inspiring for me, at least, and for a lot of folks. I watched back a lot of what he said, and just reminders that the power is always with the people, not with the people in power. I think that was my biggest takeaway is reminding Americans that the power is not within these elected officials, right? The power is within you. And ultimately we have to make sure, and we're holding them accountable and using our voice and resources to remind them, who they work for. And maybe it's because of social media or, just media streams in general, or how we communicate these days, that we've sort of pedestalized politicians and informal leaders in our society is holding more power than the average folks. And that's just not true. And it could be that, we're union workers, and we understand that because every day we understand that we hold the keys to the business that we work at, right, as a collective. But I think more people are realizing that, and then showing that across the world right now on different issues that they're passionate about, and however they're protesting. I guess I can't speak to people who are out there fighting for their issues because, if there's a cause that's, greatly affecting your life, you're going to have a different level of temperament for how that issue is being handled. So I guess I'm just, at the end of the day, I'm really excited that people are getting active and people are organizing in order to get the results that they ultimately deserve, right? Not just rolling over and taking whatever we're told to take.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing wrong with peaceful protesting. I mean, man, people get afraid of that and then they just don't do anything, right?
Yeah, I think, like what's going on at Tesla dealerships, right? I don't think anybody's gotten hurt so far. I'm not going to condone, I guess, people committing crimes, but I think, people are afraid even to, I mean, gosh, you watch some of these people at town halls, if they speak out of line or they're too loud or boisterous, they get hauled off in cuffs, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are afraid of that because, having an arrest on your record could negatively affect your ability to get a job later. And so people are worried about, the side effects of engaging. So I mean, I can't blame anybody for not wanting to be, involved, but I think we all have a threshold that we have to see where we're at, engaged, whether or not we're willing to say, yep, I'm gonna go out and peacefully protest today and use my voice. And hey, maybe if it pisses some people off, so be it. But I'm pretty pissed off right now too, and I'm not being treated fairly, and things aren't going the right direction. And I'm gonna stand up for my rights and use my First Amendment freedom and voice my opinions and needs today. And I think that we can all find a baseline there that says we need to be engaged at some level, because we can't stand by and just say, these atrocities are okay, even if we're not being harmed by them, right? Even if something's not affecting you directly, if something's doing harm to somebody else, I think we all have a duty and a responsibility to do something.
I mean, think about union advocacy. You got policies, politics, or whatever, that like Drive. We're going to talk about a little bit of that, the Drive program. For those who may not know, can you break down Drive and why it's so important for union members or even taxpayers?
Yeah. So Drive is an acronym. It's essentially our fund, and it stands for Democrat, Republican, Independent Voter Education, and that can encompass a lot of things. But essentially, what that means is the Teamsters are not tied to any political party whatsoever. Traditionally we support more Democrats than Republicans, but that's shifting a little bit for a lot of reasons. Biggest being that I think some Republicans are finding out that they have a lot of like blue collar voters in their area that they represent that aren't voting for them because they're not taking care of the single most important issue in their life, which is their job. Everything starts and stops with your job, right? If you don't have one, then you don't have, financial security and stability, and it affects your health and everything else. And so if I live in, and I'm just going to use, we were talking about St. Louis County earlier, Duluth, which is a very polarizing, interesting area of politics. But a lot of folks up there are finding out that they've got voters in their area that would vote for them, Republicans, that aren't voting for them and voting for Democrats because the Democrats are supporting workers, right? So now I've got, and I interview these politicians that are at our meetings, and we screen them because they'll come to us and say, hey, I'd like to be able to put your Teamsters logo on my flyers that I send out as an endorsement from the Teamsters. So we screen them, we ask them, dozens and dozens of questions, how they feel about certain things and certain topics, and how would they react if they were presented with a bill on this issue. And then once they become elected, we hold them accountable to those answers, right? But a lot of those folks that we screen already know like who we are and what our needs are. But sometimes we've got politicians that'll screen with us, and they find out pretty quick that we can agree on a lot of issues. Right? I can agree with Republicans on different topics, but on the topic of labor, there's no swaying for me. You're either all in or you're all out. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of constituents is maybe they agree with Pete Stauber up north on gun rights, and they agree on, things surrounding, the sexy things that make headlines like abortion and legal marijuana and all these different topics, right? But when it comes to the topic of labor, it's like, can we trust you? And because everything starts and stops with that. And if they can't trust him, then they're not going to give him their vote, right? So we've got a lot of politicians that are starting to come to the table from the Republican side that haven't before in the past, and some new, younger Republican candidates that are more towards the middle and more pro-union, which I think is really interesting and exciting. But at the end of the day, the Drive program within the Teamsters essentially makes sure that anybody who has a Teamsters logo on their flyer or has been endorsed by the Teamsters, has been vetted by folks like myself and other trustees on the board, so that you can trust that when you put, fill in the circle next to their name, that they're going to be fighting for workers' rights on legislation that comes across their desk. Other issues, sometimes there's a spillover effect into labor. Like when we talk about green policies, right? If we're going to raise taxes on like glass bottles and plastic bottle use, okay, in order to, curb people from using those things, and hopefully that helps out the environment in some way, or recycling plastic bottles and glass bottles. Okay, that's great, but how does that affect our folks who deliver, cases of water or cases of soda or beer industry, right? How does that affect labor? So sometimes those issues aren't, in their own little sections. And so we have to have those conversations too. But at the end of the day, when you go into the ballot box, if you see somebody on, our list of candidates who's been approved by the Drive board, you can know that person is going to support union labor. And that's the crux of the Teamsters, right? So.
Yeah, it's important to understand that, like you said, it starts and stops with a job. That's one way to look at how the economy keeps going. I mean, so yeah, the role that Drive plays in organizing these rallies and news conferences, and also just building support for the issues that affect the working people. I mean, I think that's huge. How does Drive, how did it get initiated? Do you, maybe a little history on that one? Sure.
So essentially, it started years and years ago, and being on the Drive board, I guess I should know more of the history behind it. I kind of fell into this role because we had a retirement, and I've been somebody who's been passionate about politics my entire life. And so they said, hey, I think you should, get involved in this. I said, okay. And I tell you what, it was one of the better things when Tom Bucher asked me to start getting involved with the Drive work. It's one of the better things that happened in my career, because it showed me that we as union workers, we have a seat at the table with these politicians, and they work for us. And I think being able to build relationships with these folks in ways that it's not just, the Teamsters, their Drive Pact gave us, $500 to buy yard signs, so now I have to make sure I take care of the Teamsters when it comes to their issues. It's not really like that. It's having Lieutenant Governor Flanagan come speak at our steward seminar and talking about how her grandfather was trying to organize his workplace, and the company had some thugs take him out at the knees and basically had him put him in a wheelchair because he was trying to fight for his rights and his coworkers' rights. Learning about these elected officials and what their stance and how they truly feel about our cause, and being able to support the people who are going to support us. I think that's what gets me motivated to be more involved in this, because politics affects, every aspect of our lives these days. But if we don't have the right people in office, a lot of these things that maybe we take for granted right now, they won't be here. And I always tell folks too, like when it comes to Drive, I give weekly out of my paycheck, as do a lot of folks, right? And essentially that money is it's not a ton of money, but it's enough money to where we can say, hey, we're going to support some people and just, help them in their fight. Right. I say a bigger strength for us politically is that we have, 77,000 active and retired members in Joint Council 32 that vote. And those votes are what's going to get people, keep their jobs. Right. And so they have a duty to support, thousands and thousands and thousands of Teamsters, let alone even more union workers. But politics and the Drive work that we're doing here, right? If you're a local 638 member or you're in the Midwest, what's your money, your $5 a week, donation going towards? it's going towards local politics first, right? I'm never going to get to sit down. I mean, we as an organization do at the top, but I'm never going to get to sit down with, the presidential candidate. Right? I'm going to sit down with the people running for your city council. I'm going to get to sit down with people running for Hennepin County Commissioner, mayor, governor races, local, state and Senate races, House of Representative races, people that are doing things that are affecting you on a daily basis. The things that are happening at the federal level, right? Important, they're going to affect you. But I would also say that if we're trying to get people in your city council that are labor friendly, is going to affect you so much more. Those people who you might not even know the names off the top of your head, because they're going to decide whether or not an Amazon hub is built in your town or a Walmart is approved for a build, and how that dynamic is going to shape labor and your local economy, right? Who's repairing the roads? Who's providing the infrastructure, labor in your community? Those decisions are going to affect you so much more. And so when you support Drive, really you're supporting local politicians first, which again is going to affect you the most. And we've seen that time and time again, where we can put people who are pro-labor to work for us, and how that spills over into other issues when we're just supporting workers at the end of the day. But when you have people that support workers, now you're supporting them in their entirety, right? We're not just thinking about, safe work environments and making sure people are paid fairly. Yes, always important. But we're thinking about the impacts that decisions that we're making on the city council are going to have on our workers potentially, right? And how it's going to have on local businesses that employ our workers, right? And it all affects one another. So that's why I'm passionate about Drive, and that's why I think it's important for our members to be involved in it, is because even if you think, Donald Trump's great or Donald Trump's awful, and the Teamsters didn't endorse Donald Trump and we didn't endorse Kamala Harris, so I don't think Drive is great anymore. It's a conversation that I know I've had a lot with people, and I can understand the frustrations. But really, the core of Drive is starting from the bottom up, and I can say with 100% certainty that we are absolutely pushing forward with pro-labor candidates, no matter what party they're aligned with, at our local and state governments. And I'm just really excited about the security that's going to provide for union workers in the Midwest here for hopefully years to come.
Yeah. You're more for the people, the labor. When people think about the local hall, I mean, if it's in the name, the local 638, right? So, I mean, the fact that you're able to put those differences aside, a lot of people have a hard time with that, saying, I've been always this way. That's is always all I ever known, or this is all my family ever done. And then, you see somebody with different values coming through, and they're just like, I don't know what to do now,
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, if you just keep it local and keep it with the union, the workers, that's makes it a little more simpler. It seems like. What do you think?
Well, it starts for me when I go into, I mean, everybody's different, right? I think when most people go into a voting booth, they've got a few of issues that are on their mind, or maybe they start and stop, with a couple things. For me, I vote with labor first, and then everything else has to come second, because everything, like I said, it starts and stops with workers. If we're not taking care of our workers, then nothing, else really matters, because it's all going to be negatively impacted. All those other topics, those hot button issues, right? So, I just think that if people start with the bottom up, that we're probably going to be better served with the people we're putting in office.
Nice. What do you think? You think is enough? Do you think is enough union members that understand the importance of engagement or the Drive initiative? Do you think we always need more? Right.
I think our local, selfishly, I think our local does more than others. Here's a stat I'm really proud of. We have a higher percentage of Drive participation than any other local in the Midwest, and it's not even close. We have over 16% of our members are in Drive. And it's not just that we have people in Drive. We have people that are, making, I would say, sizable donations to Drive every week, because I think our members get it. Especially, we talk about, we're not like we're not like Thanksgiving dinner where it's like, don't talk politics, right? It's like we talk politics a lot, at our meetings. We talk politics a lot, and it's uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable for me doing the drive work. I'll take my union hat off for a sec. A guy like Jim Abler, right, Republican from Anoka. I invited him to come speak at our steward seminar this last year. Jim and I probably disagree on the vast majority of issues that he would vote on. And it doesn't matter because he loves the Teamsters. That guy, when we're at the Capitol, it's like he can sniff us out. And he loves the Teamsters. And he was so huge in getting our bill passed to get our school bus drivers unemployment insurance in the summers. That was a bill that was, well over a decade in the works. And, Jim was crucial in getting that across the line. We look at stats all the time. It's like, okay, how many Democrats and how many Republicans and who's got the majority right now at our Minnesota state legislature? The Teamsters have a huge majority, right? Because if I take the D's and the R's away and I just look at who are our endorsed candidates, I think we're like, and I should know this off the top of my head, but it's over 65% of our endorsed candidates are in office, right? So the Teamsters have a majority at the state capitol, and that's what I care about first. And I can disagree with, I love Tim Walz. I was critical of him the other day when they made this. He made an executive order to force all these state workers back to the office, so that was never part of their job recommendations, right? And that hurt AFSCME workers, another union, and so. Yeah, I can think he does great on some policies, but then we can be critical of these folks too. We don't have to ride or die with politicians, right? They work for us. And so we can shift from, we can shift our support as well. And I think our members understand that. If you've been to one of our meetings, you know that, yep, we're going to talk politics and yep, it's going to be uncomfortable. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we support workers and we support people. That's our one commonality. We can disagree on all the other issues up and down the board, but we're going to make sure that we're fighting for workers' rights. And I think that's the common ground that gets us through those tough political conversations.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be uncomfortable to grow. When you're comfortable, that's when you're probably not doing much growth. So,
and that's true. And that's true in everything, right? That's true in everything, which is also why, kind of coming back full circle there on what we're trying to do is, local with these different initiatives. Like, hey, it's not comfortable to try new things because there's a potential for failure or embarrassment, or just the struggle of trying to do new things. But if you're not, right, ultimately, eventually something's, going to fail, right? You can't just continue to do the same thing over and over again because, something's going to fall apart, right? You're going to miss somewhere, or you're going to fall behind, or you're not going to, be able to serve your members' needs. And so we have to be, pushing forward in everything we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the huge part is being uncomfortable, like you mentioned earlier. Sometimes we get too comfortable. Maybe we're eating too good. So, man, that's great. Member engagement, education. One of the things that we touched on last time is the importance of educating members and also keeping them engaged with their local or just as with labor. What strategies have you been working on to help members get more involved?
So one of the things we talked about this before too, but if people hadn't heard the last episode, so I went to college to be a teacher. Everybody in my family is a teacher. I wanted to do that too. But I ended up making a career out of my summer job, which was a UPS driver. And, so glad that, what I thought was a tough decision, maybe possibly, a decision I'd regret at the time, turned out to be, absolutely incredible. But I still have this passion for education and a passion for kids. And so we spend a lot of time at schools, and not just, high schools, but I'll go to middle schools. I went to Brooklyn Park Middle School. It's a STEAM school, and they do the coolest career day every year, where kids are super, super engaged and ask really good questions. And Forest Lake high school does another really good one where kids can sign up to go to the classes that they're interested in. They bring in like 100 different, career options. And so we've been, at least during the school year, every school year, which from September 1st all the way through June, we're in at least one school a month. Last month we were in 3. And so this month, let's see, I'm just looking at my calendar across the way here. We've got 2 this month. I finally, a couple weeks ago, I was really excited. We got to go to Fargo, North Dakota. So most of, I guess, up until that point, the schools that we had visited were all in the Twin Cities metro area. But I went up to Cloquet up north a couple months ago for their career day and talked to a bunch of kids about union jobs. That was awesome. Partnered up with Local 346 out of Duluth. And that was really cool. But yeah, I got to go to West Fargo High School recently and talk to some kids who signed up to learn more about the Teamsters. And I think, for me, I grew up in a union household. My parents were union workers. So I knew mom and dad are in a contract cycle, so we could go on strike this, it's like, that's just a dinner table conversation. For a lot of kids, they don't know what a union is. They don't know who the Teamsters are. They don't know that there are better job opportunities. And I think what's been really fun is finding schools that our members have kids at, and then going to those schools and talking to the students where we have some of our members who have kids there already. And so I'll give you a quick example of this and then my little call to action here. So Tom McQuay is one of our UPS stewards. A daughter goes to Andover High School. And we had a couple other drivers whose kids went to that school too. So I went to a career investigation day, and there's all these kids, and I'm talking about UPS jobs, and I didn't realize that some of my members' kids were in the audience. And one of them goes, "Do you know my dad? Do you know my dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know your dad. I know your dad." And they're like, "He really makes that much money?" I go, yeah, he does. Like, so next time he's being cheap, you tell him, Scott said you can fork up the money, right? So that was pretty cool, because I think a lot of these kids are like, like, oh, my dad does, or my mom does this, and my mom works at, this business or whatever. And then they find out, wow, I didn't realize, like, everybody in this room thinks my parents have a really cool job, or a really coveted job, or benefits or whatever, or I didn't know that. And that's been really cool. So getting to go to the schools where we have members that have kids at has been really fun, and branching out to different areas. And I think what's been really inspiring is, at 16, when I'll talk to like a class of juniors, if like it's a junior business class, those kids are oftentimes getting their first jobs. And typically your first job is, nothing to write home about, right? It's, you're doing grunt work or getting your feet wet, just doing whatever you're told. And to find out that, wait, there's jobs where I have rights in the workplace, and I can, demand my shift. I can't just get sent home whenever my boss says. And there's jobs that pay that much, right? Or these different pieces of labor that kids don't even realize exist, and they're just starting on the workforce. So I guess as kids are getting their first jobs, entering the workforce, helping them understand that you don't just have to take what's given to you. And there are jobs out there where you're not just, you have a seat at the table. You're not on the menu every day. Has been pretty cool. And then sorry, Ray, I'll give you one more quick example. I could go on forever. But I had a kid in that class, and one kid was talking about how they're a busser at a restaurant. And they're like, yeah, I show up for work on a Friday and it's a slow night. So my boss says, oh, you can go home. Well, I only worked for an hour, so I didn't really make any money. And I didn't get to go out with my friends and do whatever. So, I just have to, suck it up, and that stinks. And there was a kid in class who's talking about they're a foods worker at union worker. I think it's Local 63 at Cub Foods. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm union at Cub, and that would never happen. I'd just get to demand my shift. If I want to go home, I can, but if I don't, I get to keep my full shift. Like, that really happens? You can tell your boss that? It's like, yeah. Like, a 16-year-old getting to tell, a 30-something-year-old how it is, right? That only happens in a union. So that's been pretty cool, is just kind of see the eyes open up a little bit, and hopefully it's a small thing that, down the road will help, these young folks as they're entering the workforce after high school, just understand the full scope of what's out there, to help themselves out later.
It's okay to be engaged. It's okay to be involved, and it's okay to have disagreements and be uncomfortable to hopefully find a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's a huge work that you're doing there, getting involved and putting that out there. So that's great. So do you think that young drivers are interested in unions or as past generations were, or do you think that things are kind of changing? What would you say?
Well, let's see. That's a tough one. I'm thinking about a few different situations I've been in recently. I wish, we hear the phrase "Make America Great Again" all the time. When I think of that, I wish we had the level of union engagement and involvement we had back in like the 50s and 60s, right? Where 10% of American households were not only in a union, but had some sort of role within their union, right? And getting back to the level of union labor that we had before. Right now, coming from somebody who works for the Teamsters, that's going to seem obvious, but the quality of life that people have when a huge portion, if not a majority of the country, has a seat at the table in their workplace, right? Then we lose out on these stories from Amazon workers just getting fired because they don't hit these imaginary production standards, or Amazon drivers having to urinate in bottles because they aren't allowed to take breaks and pull over, or Amazon drivers getting hurt because they're sprinting up icy driveways in the winter to trying to make their quotas in order to just not get fired. I think if we can get to a standard of work where the worker is respected and all work has dignity, then we're going to see more young people want to get involved in, union labor. I do see right now, like, just because I do get to spend a decent amount of time talking with, young people about union jobs, I do see the light bulbs going on with kids who are, I would say, curious and maybe even excited about, the potential of working a union job, because they're looking for a way to level the race, so to speak. Like, my brain works in metaphors. So like right now, if you're a senior in high school, it is scary because you're entering into, do I want to go to college and take on a ton of debt at a high interest rate that I'm gonna have to pay back one day, and hopefully I get a decent paying job when I come out, and hopefully I can live on my own one day, because it's so damn expensive to just live, let alone will I ever own a house, because interest rates are so, like, they are running this race uphill with hurdles right now, and they're trying to figure out a way where they can give themselves an advantage. And I think good paying union jobs and trades jobs right now are a way to do that, right? Maybe they've had older siblings who've gone to college and took out, $100,000 in student loans, and then had to live with mom and dad for 8 years until they could afford to live on their own in some regard. And they don't even own a home yet. And they don't want that for themselves. They want to figure out, how can I do it, in a way that's going to make me successful? Well, if you want to go work at, we'll use UPS as an example again, right out of high school, a part-timer, do that for a few years, sign a driving bid at 21. You can be 25 years old, making well over $100,000 a year, retire with a 35-year pension at, 56 years old, and, not have to go into debt to do any of it. Get your CDL for free. And if you want to go take another job later on or go to work for yourself, guess what? Go do it. Right. There's, I think, a lot of opportunity right now in union labor that young people are seeing as a way to give themselves an advantage and a way to be successful as an adult in what's a very, very uncertain, stressful trajectory for their adult life. So that's where I think the Teamsters and other unions come into play, is like, hey, here's some stability, here's some financial security that we can offer you as you're trying to figure out how to be successful.
Nice. So as far as the trucking industry for the future of labor, and we mentioned Drive and some of the initiatives that they're doing and getting involved in, as far as technology, the regulations, even how companies hire drivers, how do you see these shifts affecting unionized trucking jobs?
The conversation I have most often with politicians is automated vehicles. And right now we're seeing companies like Tesla, Waymo, these other businesses that are these big tech companies that are just having automated vehicles drive all over, whether it's hauling, bobtailing semis across Texas and South Dakota, or bringing people to and from places of work in Teslas in San Francisco, in order to collect data to bring to politicians to say it is safe. Now, are automated vehicles cool? Yeah, it's cool that a vehicle can drive itself and that, it's relatively safe. It's not that safe. We have a lot of data that shows these automated vehicles driving through active crime scenes or not yielding to police officers in emergency vehicles or hitting people. So they're not that safe. But if they can prove them to be safe enough and these big tech companies can line the pockets of these politicians enough to allow them to service different industries, that would be the downfall of our economy. If we lose logistics jobs, I mean, I tell people all the time, if you're not in the trucking world, then you don't know that when you're driving down the highway, all those semi trucks and everybody in freight is making a lot of money. And that's a tough job. And it's a job that is paying for infrastructure in your community because of the tax dollars that those folks bring in. And even if like a company like UPS in just the Maple Grove building automated 10% of their drivers, right? That's like $3 million in tax revenue per year for just that hub that we would lose out on, right? And so that's the way I frame it to politicians to make it a bipartisan issue, because ultimately they have a budget and they have to make sure that they can afford to pay for the services that are required to help a local state economies move. So when we're at the Capitol and we're talking to these politicians, it's one thing to talk about, folks like us in the industry who would lose their jobs because of automated drivers. But it's another thing too, to bring up, well, and by the way, we would not only be losing these jobs, but the money saved would be going back to big tech companies, not even close to Minnesota, going to billionaires who don't care about the fire department here in your hometown. They don't care about the resources that your school needs or that your roads need, because those tax dollars are no longer in your community. And how do you find, folks with CDLs, like paying jobs in another industry, after you've been, in the trucking industry for, decades, right? So I think when you can frame it to politicians as an economic issue, and by the job loss that would come from automating and having driverless vehicles delivering freight, not only the safety issues, but even if they don't want to look at the safety issues, what that would do to your economy, it would be, detrimental. And frankly, if we don't have people driving vehicles, whether that's, package drivers or freight drivers or anything in between, that losing that to automation, I don't know how we would recover. Because to this point, automated jobs that have been automated, I think for the most part, we've been able to find those folks like paying jobs, but we're a growing population with shrinking job opportunities through automation. I mean, we can go on and on, but I don't know anybody who's a paralegal anymore because of ChatGPT, right? Or Uber drivers in San Francisco. And now Nashville, because they just approved it down in Tennessee. Those jobs are going. So then what do those people do? If that's what you've been doing every day, now your work is disappearing due to automation. Are you able to find a like paying job? And are we still creating new jobs and new industries that'll support young people coming up needing labor? So automation is the single largest topic I discuss with politicians, because it's something it's happening right now. And I don't think a lot of people understand it. And I think when people understand it from what it'll do and the economic damage it'll do, but also the regards to safety and the long-term effects, I think once people understand it, they go, oof, not quite the same concept I had prior. And maybe it's not this idea we should be supporting. So that's the future of what we're doing, at least with Local 638's efforts right now, with politics especially, is making sure that we have good working relationships with our politicians and people who care about labor in office. So that way, when things like automated vehicles in Minnesota, should that be, allowed, should businesses be allowed to slash their workforce in order to buy a bunch of Teslas and say, good luck on the job line. I don't think it's something we should support.
Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult conversation to have. People, it was like that in school, right? You had the cool kids and you had the kids that were good at the books. And, it's like, well, it's one way to be cool, but does it make sense logically? Is it actually going to work? It's, what I'm saying, the Teslas, they look cool sometimes to people, but
Yeah, I love Tesla.
American muscle.
You know?
I still don't get rid of my Mustang.
Oh no, I was joking. I was making fun of it. I love Tesla. It's all computer. I think like I'll give it real quick. My dad owned a Tesla, and then after everything that's taken place, he sold it, took a financial hit to do it, and then bought a UAW made vehicle. I think a lot of folks right now are like the shine of like an automated vehicle and a vehicle that has all these computer screens. I think that's kind of worn off a little bit. It's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, that's great. And technology is cool. But at the end of the day, we also need to make sure that we're not implementing anything, but, implementing technology that's going to do harm to folks, right? We shouldn't be implementing things that do harm to other areas. And what's the sacrifice that we're making here? To have automated vehicles, great. That's really cool. But are we also willing to say that's something we're going to do in order to not allow my school to be able to pay the electric bill this month because we've lost so many jobs in our community to automation, right? So yeah, there's a lot of big factors at play in the next probably decade here when it comes to union labor. That'll be very interesting, and we'll see what the community says about where we're going to stand on these issues, and hopefully people still have that same energy that we saw over the weekend here when it comes to those fights down the road, because it doesn't look like they're going to let up.
Yeah. So think about unions and, as far as the changes for the industry, what are they doing to prepare, or what do you see that's being done to prepare for the future? Anything you could speak on to give an eye opener as to what's going on?
Yeah, well, we're always organizing internally and externally, right? So, for me, a big part of what my job is building relationships with not only the places we represent, but like I said, going to schools, talking to the future of labor, talking with our politicians, and just making sure that when our issues have a cause that needs to be fought for, that people understand what that cause is and why they should be supporting it.
Nice. All right. So, what do you think we should do as far as for the future? One thing that we wish drivers would keep in mind, unions or not, understood what unions actually do. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show and to come back on the show as well. I mean,
yeah,
the support that the hall also has for.
And I appreciate you, Ray, because I got this right on my desk every time anybody walks in. Yeah, baby. It's that like top episode award, baby.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, man. Yeah. So I think a lot of people just need to know more and continue to have these conversations and continue to keep learning about what we need to do as to advocate for the worker, for labor. I think those are huge. So looking ahead, what is the biggest goal for Local 638 next year or the year to come?
Oof. Well, we got quite a few. We sat down recently, and there's a lot taking place right now. So we've got a lot right in front of our face, and there's a lot coming down the line. Where do we want to be in the next, not only year, but where do we want to be in the next 5 years? And the biggest takeaway that everything we talked about that kind of boiled down to is being a more member-led local. I talked about a little bit ago about how, about 60, 70 years ago, more people were engaged and had roles, like actual roles, titles within their union that they were responsible for. And how can we be more member-led? Because I don't think, and this is, like a thought from, not just me, but others here in our local, top-down leadership doesn't always work. It's simple and it makes sense, right? Because there's a hierarchy, right? And there's a chain of command, right? And how, and it makes sense. It's simple, but I don't think for the success of the labor movement that it's, the best option. And so I think the direction that we're already heading, that I hope we can continue to grow out, is, having different committees, right? So, and different sort of like groups within, our local that people can be involved in. Like, yeah, I'm a local 638 member, but I'm also involved in this, right? Whether that's the women's committee, or whether that's the LGBTQ plus caucus, or the Indigenous conference, or maybe, hold on. If you can see this here, this jacket was gifted to me. We used to have a Teamsters Local 638 broomball team back in the 90s, right? And so
cool.
Yeah, I got it. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was going to smell like cigarettes or something. It actually smells pretty good, but it was an eBay purchase. But somebody threw it on there. Maybe who knows whose it was. But Local 68 used to have like a broomball team back 30 years ago, and that just made me think of like trying to be more engaged and having things for people to be involved in. So, working towards being a more member-led local and giving people more roles and more of a voice. I think, you attend our union meetings. I think, folks who've attended our union meetings for a long time could definitely agree that we've seen more engagement and more people, literally standing up and saying, I'm passionate about this, or we should be doing this, or why don't we try this, or what are our thoughts on this? And that is, stressful, because it can be hard conversations to have, but it's so inspiring to see people active and involved and engaged, right? And taking a role and trying new things and caring, because we have well-attended meetings where people are, voicing their opinions. And that is great, because it means our members give a damn and they're engaged and they care. If we had low attended meetings where nobody said anything, and people were apathetic, that would be concerning. So I'm excited to see the momentum that's being created, and hopefully where that goes with the level of engagement and the growing numbers of people going to meetings, the growing numbers of people asking questions about whether it's our bylaws and how do they work, and maybe we should look at this, or hey, we've never done this before, what if we tried that? And that kind of energy is contagious, and I think that kind of energy is what's going to be able to, like I said, push us over the next year and 5 years into a direction that's more of a member-led local than what most locals have, which is just traditional top-down leadership, giving people more of a voice and finding ways for people to have outlets where they can engage and be involved. I think that's what I'm most excited about for the next year or two.
Well, I champion you on that. Coming on the podcast and taking that risk. Everything comes with that risk, right? And I think a lot of locals can. I think they could do the same. Also, talk about these conversations, and we touch on quite a few things that are actually very huge topics that affect a lot of people, like layoffs, automation, politics, and also even like Teslas. So there's a lot of things that people may not want to actually talk about, but it's just a simple conversation. Having that gets the ball going, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say for those that your union members, or what would be the takeaway from this conversation? What would you say that would be?
Well, I'd say right now, it's hard because a lot of us don't have a lot of energy at the end of the day, and our mental load probably feels like it's at max capacity. But I guess I would just ask that if you feel, like you do have a little more room on the plate, or maybe there's, you have a calling to get involved, because, putting energy into something can also, there's give and take, right? There's reciprocity in this union work that we do. And so I would just ask folks that if you feel like you have, some room to get involved, or you want to be a part of, some change, or you're pissed off, that's great. Use that energy, that frustration, to build something and to be part of molding something better. And I would just, I can't say all the details here because it was part of our official union meetings business, but we had a tough conversation at one of our last meetings, and some people that were frustrated about it. And one of the things that was part of the conversation after was, right now we're forging ahead and we're plowing a path for young people who don't even know they're going to be Teamsters yet one day, right? And if we stop because we're frustrated about how things are going, or we, excuse me, say, okay, well, I give up then because it's too stressful or it's too hard, or I don't have the time or energy for this. We're letting down people that don't even know what we're up to right now. And the things that we're doing, we are literally forging a pathway for the next generation of labor with everything we're doing. So just because we met with a roadblock here, we stumble here, doesn't mean we should stop or give up, because there's a lot of people counting on us that we don't even know about yet. So that's my call to action.
Nice. I like that. Don't stop. Keep going, and then you never know what the rewards may be in the future, especially if you have good intentions. So I appreciate that. Where can people go to learn more or to get involved, or put the shout out for call to action? Where would you send them?
Well, so for our members, you can go to teamsters638.com. That's our website, and it does have links to our socials on there. I'd say we're most active on our Facebook page, Teamsters Local 638 on Facebook, just because that's, if you look at the demographics of our membership, it's almost exactly the same demographics of Facebook. So we're kind of trying to meet our members where they're at, and most of our members are on Facebook. So that's where we spend, the majority of our time with, and put out, the most of our content. And the events that we have coming up for, our members, whether it's, we're doing an annual golf outing, we're going to go to Valley Fair this late at the end of the summer, a family day, so you can bring family out there. It's covered by the local, lunch is covered by the local, and it's just like a big get together, just social gathering. But also, like we were at Hands Off over the weekend at multiple locations in North Dakota, here around the Twin Cities. I put that out on social media beforehand with the link to sign up to find an event near you. Or, I'm going to put something out on the social media regarding May Day. If you want to go down and hang out with us at the Capitol, and make your voice heard, things that you can get involved in. I'm always going to put that content out there. If you have an idea, you can shoot the Facebook page a message too, and we can help you, make that dream a reality, so to speak, as far as something that you think we should be doing that maybe we're not aware of yet, and we can champion that cause too.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Scott. I mean, you've given enlightenment to a lot of things that you got going on, and for everybody else that didn't get their phone call answered while we're doing this recording, I apologize. He turned his phone off just a little bit. Man, that's like, wow, that's amazing. But thank you for doing that, Scott, and appreciate it. And so for all of you listening, if you got something out of this episode, and make sure to hit the follow button. If you didn't follow us last time, follow us this time. I appreciate it. And if you have any reviews or anything like that, or any questions you'd like to ask us, we welcome it. And we also appreciate if you share it with another driver or someone else. Tell them about what you learned, and hopefully we can spread that good message to all of those to get involved with their local and to be an advocate for labor. So I appreciate you, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah. And so we'll catch you next time on the next episode. Until then, drive safe and stay informed. So that's delivered.
Are you a trucker looking for a safe and reliable place to park? Look no further than Truck Parking Club. With locations across the country, we've got the perfect spot waiting for you, whether it's daily or long-term parking. And right now, use promo code DELIVERED at checkout for an exclusive discount. Reserve your spot today at truckparkingclub.com and drive stress-free, knowing your parking is covered.